Hello, U.S. History. Today is Thursday, March 18th. And a couple of things before I get to the last part of your notes today. Last night I posted this update about your registration for next year. On Monday, your counselors will be zooming in and going over a lot of this material with you. But it's really important that you review it ahead of time. They want you to kind of know what's going on and kind of have an idea of what you want your electives to be next year. So that will be here. Above it, you will see today's assignment where I'll post this Screencastify, and then I'll post the Ed Puzzle assignment. It's a quick assignment, and it's not due till Monday. And my focus, the majority of what I'm doing today and tomorrow, is your grades. So you're going to need your World War II notes. Not that. And we're picking it up with the attack on Pearl Harbor. Sorry, let me fix this for you here. The last thing you wrote down was about the beginning of the war in Europe. So now we're going to get to how the United States gets involved in the war. So this is, it's the same topic, but just draw a line and add this as kind of a new section. So we're talking about the attack on Pearl Harbor, takes place December 7th, 1941. After you're done with registration and stuff on Monday, we'll talk about the effects and FDR's speech and everything. But that quote down there, he called it a date which will live in infamy. And that infamy means something you will remember always, usually in a bad way. Remember that this is a recording, so if I go too fast, just pause and keep on going. That's the good thing about Screencastify. You can work at your own pace. Okay, so just the facts. The attack took place December 7th, 1941, and it was Pearl Harbor, which was a U.S. naval base in the Hawaii Territory. Hawaii was not a state yet. It would become a state in 1959, but at this point it was just a U.S. territory. It was a major Japanese victory. It was planned very carefully, and it resulted in a declaration of war on Japan by us, the United States. And then the very next day after we do that, Germany and Italy declare war on the United States. So now we are at war with all of the Axis powers. We're at war with Germany, Italy, and Japan all at the same time, and that's going to be very tricky. The battle results are there were 8 destroyed battleships, 4 of which were sunk completely, 3 cruisers, 3 destroyers, an anti-aircraft ship, and something called a mine layer ship. And that's obviously a ship that goes around and plants mines under the ocean floor. 188 aircraft. So all of these numbers don't mean anything until you realize that at the time, this is about 70 to 80% of what we had in our Navy. So they completely crippled the United States Navy. And that was the plan. That's what they meant to do. There were a total of 2,400 killed and about 1,200 wounded. And this is all within a few hours. This whole attack took maybe 2 to 3 hours total. So that is a very quick and shocking kind of victory. Okay. The Japanese leadership, we mentioned before, the Emperor of Japan was Hirohito. And of course, he's emperor because he was part of a family line of emperors. But the military leaders of Japan were the real power behind all of this war activity. At times, their military leaders, thought that the emperor was too weak and they wanted to do more. And their main leader, the prime minister of Japan, was a guy named Hideki Tojo. So sometimes Tojo was the decision maker where Hirohito was just kind of there. He didn't actually have too much military power. Japan is an island nation, a small island nation. And because of that, Japan, especially at this time, lacked resources, vital resources like oil, lumber, anything Japan needed, they had to import, which is very expensive. So, because of this, the Japanese military was very aggressive when it came to building an empire. And you'll see in a minute just how far they got. They invaded China, uh, North and South Korea, which were one place at the time, and all the way down to the Philippines. So they took over most of the Pacific rim of Asia. So a lot of countries were occupied and um, ruled over by the Japanese during this time. And it was mostly because they needed resources. The US got in the way of that because the US was blocking oil imports to Japan. So they had reason to be angry at the United States, which is kind of what led up to the Pearl Harbor attack. Here is, you can see kind of the full extent that the Japanese Empire grew to during World War II. They got all the way down to Australia. You can see they have Manchuria, which is China, obviously all of Japan, a lot of Western China. Um, the countries that are down below there are Vietnam, Laos, all the way down through Malaysia to the Philippines. So they had a huge, very expansive empire. The other part that they controlled was all of this Pacific Ocean area. There were tons of small islands out here that the Japanese occupied. And of course, they're going to get as far as Hawaii when they attack Hawaii, which is in the Pacific. Okay, so what are the results of this? Um, from the split second the Japanese attacked Pearl Harbor, there was no problem getting the American public to support war. It was an extremely shocking and violent attack. It was, a surprise and sneak attack as far as the American citizenry knew. And because of that, the very next day, December 8th, Roosevelt makes a speech in front of Congress asking them to declare war on Japan, which they immediately do. The next day, Hitler declares war on the United States, and that doesn't sound like a huge deal, but he actually never bothered declaring war on other places. He never declared war on Poland and France, he just invaded them. So it was almost if the Japanese and the Germans wanted to draw America into the war to just kind of make sure that they could take out the biggest boy on the block, so to speak, the only power that could really threaten Hitler or the Japanese. So, why the Japanese attack on Pearl Harbor? I mentioned the fact that the Japanese needed resources. We very often would block those resources. And they knew that if they could cripple the United States fleet by attacking this naval base, that it would be very hard for us to mobilize for war. And it was. It took months for us to kind of get everything up and running. And during that time, they would be able to move through the Pacific Ocean freely. They wouldn't have to worry about US destroyers or planes or anything trying to stop them. So it really cripples the United States military. It takes us months and months to get planes and ships and everything built again so that we can start to fight the Japanese. Just a little idea of what Hawaii looks like. This is right smack dab in the Pacific Ocean, pretty much halfway between the West Coast, where we are, and Japan. So it's pretty far. It's over 3,000 miles that the Japanese had to go. They also attacked several other places on the same night. They attacked Guam, they attacked the Philippines, and it was all like stepping stones to get them to Pearl Harbor, Hawaii. And Pearl Harbor is right here on the island of Oahu, right there. So it was carefully planned months in advance. And what the United States realized is not only had they planned it for a long time, but they were having peace talks with us at the very same time. So the Japanese ambassador would say things like, we want to make sure we're peaceful and we don't want to go to war with you, while all along they're planning this attack. Just another idea of how far it is here. This is Japan. They are uh, this is basically the route they took to do the attack. They flew all the way through here, and on the way we're attacking small islands, and then even on their return they attacked places on the way back. And we're talking about, like it says there, 3,900 miles. So you're talking about refueling, making sure you have ships to support your aircraft. I mean, this is not something you just decide to do the night before. And there's a rare photo of the attack. I actually think this is a photo from a Japanese plane. This is Pearl Harbor base right here. Oh, this is rare because it's a color photograph of the explosion on the USS Arizona. And the USS Arizona was a huge battleship that was sunk at Pearl Harbor. And there it is sinking. Excuse me. And this is what it looked like hours after the attack. You can see it's just completely destroyed and crippled. And if you go to Hawaii today, that is the ship there. You can see it just below the surface. That sort of white building, you can see there's people inside of it. What they're actually doing is walking over a glass floor where they can look down and see the ship. It has not moved since the day that it sunk. So from December 7th, it's been there since then. It's very eerie, to a place to visit if you ever get to do that. It's kind of a cool memorial. The headlines the next day, you can see it says December 8th. It's kind of hard to see on there, but it says 1,500 dead. It ends up there's going to be about 2,000 people dead. And Congress votes to go to war against Japan. Another headline, U.S. declares state of war, and it gives a death toll there. Now, this is the speech you're going to be hearing later. You don't have to write this down, obviously, but I'm just giving you an idea. I want you to look at the very last part where he says, "I regret to tell you that many American lives have been lost." That's December 8th, 1941, and we wouldn't know the full extent of the damage until later. But that is the day we declare war on Japan. Okay, I'm going to hold on there. I'm going to move that out of the way. Okay, so now go ahead and go back into Classroom, and you're going to see a link to Edpuzzle. This little, I think it's like, I don't know, a 7 or 8 minute little video. It's about a guy named Dory Miller. And if you've ever seen the movie Pearl Harbor, which is in general a pretty crappy movie, except for the part about Dory Miller, and the actual battle itself is pretty good. The love story and stuff is stupid, but the actual battle parts are kind of cool. So Dory Miller was a sailor. At the time, the military was segregated. Black soldiers were not trained in infantry. They weren't trained to use weapons. And as Pearl Harbor is being attacked, he grabs a huge anti-aircraft gun on the ship, and you'll see the pictures of what he did. And he shoots down several planes. And this is someone who has never trained, even with a rifle, who's using a giant anti-aircraft gun. So it's a great story because it's immediately after this that they're going to desegregate the military, and conditions for African Americans in the military are going to start to get a little bit better after this. Okay, so that is the only thing that you have to worry about doing. Please also make sure that you read over this information from your counselors, and then on Monday they will be here to guide you through. Okay, see you guys on Monday.